Well, tēnā tātou ia hui hui mai nei. I'm Cissy. Welcome to this webinar, all of you that have been coming in here. We're going to get to grips with economics tonight, and the chat's going hot, so feel free to say what you want in our little chat panel. I've got Ganesh Nana and Pam Ford with us, so we're in good hands. Now, I first met Ganesh when I was doing the Welfare Expert Advisory Group hui. So I was facilitating those hui up and down Aotearoa, and I was lucky enough to sometimes get into the car with that Ganesh was in when we were debriefing, and I realised he was talking in a way that I could understand, and not only that, he's got a wicked sense of humour. So I thought, you know, he's our man that we want to have on the webinar tonight. I know Pam through her community work, actually volunteering on a lot of different committees. And what's really struck me about Pam, and I've known you, Pam, on these committees for over 10 years, is your real integrity. You're an honest woman who stands by your principles. That's another thing that we need tonight. Now, Ganesh is an economist, and that for BERL, which is the Business Economic Research Limited. It's a privately owned business. And Pam is the General Manager Economic Development for ATED, which is the Auckland Tourism Events and Economics Development. And that's good. They've both got economics and economist in their job description. So I think we are in good hands. So I'm just going to ask you, Pam, is there anything else you'd like to let us know about you?
Thanks, Cissy. Tēnā koutou, everybody. I'm very proud to be here tonight, and really thank you for the opportunity to have a chat and share. I'm really honoured to share the platform with Ganesh, who's someone I admire greatly as an economist, who always speaks his truth and has a lot of philosophies that I can really agree with. I do also want to acknowledge the people tuned in tonight, because yes, it is one of the first cold, windy nights of winter, and you're watching this, which tells me, you know, pretty good assumption that all of you and us are consumed right now dealing with the crisis that's impacting on people and communities and businesses that we really care about. So thank you very much for tonight, Ngā mihi nui. I also want to acknowledge, obviously, tangata whenua of the land that we're here on, and I'm really looking forward to this next hour. Thank you.
Well, kia ora, Pam. What about you, Ganesh?
Kia ora, and thank you, Cissy, and thank you, Pam, for those nice words. Hopefully I'll live up to them. It's a bit of pressure there, but never mind. Yes, I'm an economist from a long time ago. I'm a first generation New Zealander. My parents came here, must be about 65, 70 years ago now. And born and bred and brought up in Wellington. So I haven't gone far in my travels around the world. I did go a little bit, but came back home. I'd like to acknowledge Māori as tangata whenua of Aotearoa, and I suppose pay my respects to all of our taonga and all of our tupuna that we have been blessed with in this country, and mihi out to all those listening in. It's a difficult time for all of us. Hopefully you're all safe and secure in your bubbles, and look after yourselves and looking after the ones you love. Kia ora.
Yeah, kia ora, thank you. It's good. I want to find out a little bit more about Pam. Did you want to say something?
I just forgot to add, sorry, I went a bit of a blank for a moment there. Just to let everybody know, I grew up in the Waikato, the mighty Waikato, and also I do wear another hat, which is Chair of Economic Development New Zealand. So very conscious of how this is impacting across the whole country right now, and how regions are really impacted too. So just for any of those non-Aucklanders out there.
That's cool. People there are saying these are two top speakers, and this is great. You're perfect for the conversation that we want to have. I've developed a couple of polls here so that we can find out who's out there in their lounges or kitchens. Now, I use the word hats. It's good, Pam, you use that too. I've got this multiple choice poll thinking about when you're listening tonight what hats you're wearing. So you can choose as many as you like. I'm launching that poll now. So let's find out. It's just a would it be called a rudimentary way of finding out who's there, but it gives you a chance to let us know the kind of things that you're you're involved in. Gives us a sense of who's out there, gives you a sense of who's out there, because I get to share that poll with you. I put in the gig economy. That's me. I'm working in the gig economy at the moment, and the freedom that comes with it also has a lot of risk. So I also I'd push social movement too. I'm looking here. Beneficiaries, people involved in the unions, others. Maybe some of the others can let us know in the chat panel. What is the gig economy? It's a good question. For me, I'm a contractor and I pick up lots of little contracts, and they're like little gigs that I am doing to pay my way. So sometimes I get big contracts and sometimes small contracts. I'm a facilitator by trade, so I try really hard to get the high-paying gigs so that I can do some of the free gigs for the social movements I'm involved in. Okay, nearly all of you have voted. I'm going to end this poll in a couple of seconds, so if you haven't, great. I can see a couple more of you. I'm ending the poll now. So public health, yes, I did miss health off, didn't I? That probably says something about me. A GP, public health. I'm going to share the results with you. So we've got 50% of the people here with us, involved in a social movement, nearly 70% from the community, but we have business people here, the gig economy, beneficiaries, faith, big amount of local and central government. I was once a very proud public servant, and others. And the others that's coming forward so far is to do with health. So, and feel free at any time to let us know, ask questions. Maori land management, great. This is good that we're getting a flavour of who's out there. So I want to start, and this really is about getting a grip. So it's okay if there's questions we don't know. We're not coming in here knowing a whole lot. So I'm just going to launch my next poll, if I can work out how to do that, where I am, no, I'm not going to do that. I have another poll that I can't work out how to get to, isn't that, oh, here we go. I do know. This is launching another poll about your own assessment in relation to economics and the economy. Like, do you feel really confident, pretty confident? I reckon it's important that we feel free here tonight to have the kind of conversations we want to have. And I can see that 50% of you have voted. I wanted to create this place where we could find out more and have those conversations, and not feel like we can't contribute because we haven't quite got a grasp of some of the concepts or the words. And often people talk in a totally different language, don't they? So 80% of you have voted. I think I'll wait till it's at 90 and then I'll share that with you. So there's this idea that you're very confident, you're able to hold a robust conversation. I feel like that's my brother. He often has robust conversations with me. I feel pretty confident. I can follow conversations. I tend to zone out a bit. Some of the jargon loses me. I think that might be me. And nope, it's another world. And that's what tonight's all about. So I'm just going to give you a couple more seconds and we'll share that poll. Excellent. 87% of you have voted. I've ended the poll. I'm sharing the results. So that's great, Pam and Ganesh. You know that people here can follow conversations, but there are a lot of us that zone out a bit. It's a totally different world. But there are some people who feel pretty confident or very confident. So we might get some great questions coming our way as well. So feel free to participate. Let's start with Ganesh. Just in a nutshell, what do people mean when they say the economy?
In a nutshell, yeah, trying to crunch everything down to about 2 minutes. I think the biggest, I will start, the biggest misunderstanding and misconception when people talk about the economy is many are probably only talking about dollars and cents, and they're talking about money, and they're talking about the finances. And I think it's critical that we don't let finances overrule the economics of a situation, and economists are the worst in that, because economics as a discipline has been hijacked by the financiers, and it's been swamped by the jargon of money and yield curves and interest rates and exchange rates and all of those sorts of things. It wasn't the economics I learned, and economics in the economy is much broader than finances. It is at the very fundamental level, and the one piece of jargon that I have to put in there, it's this thing called resources, which is the closest and dearest to our hearts as economists. And resources are essentially things that we have available to us, either as individuals or whānau or iwi, or as a community or as a nation, things that we have available to us that we can use or utilise to produce something or deliver some services, whether we're producing milk or butter, or whether we're delivering services like operations to make people better in terms of health delivery, or even just health advice about how people should lead a more healthy lifestyle, or those sorts of things. So the things that we might have available to us to do those things are things like the land we have available to us, the forests, the biodiversity, the fish in the water. We might have available to us things like buildings and equipment, and then we can argue about what most important, but one of the most important things we have available to us is ourselves, the people. And we put all those things together, and with a bit of luck, we can deliver things that we want, whether it's food or shelter or clothing or services. Now that process is what economics is all about. Now, depending upon what school of economic thought you're in, and there are a lot of economists, and then we all have a habit of disagreeing with ourselves, and we'll openly admit that. The narrow version of economics will take a very narrow view of what resources we have, and say, well, resources are the only things that are available are things that we own and control. Things like the buildings or the plot of land you've got. Whereas myself take a much broader view of resources, and one of the things that we have available to us, in my mind, that makes an economy functional is the sense of community. If we have people that actually feel connected to a community, feel like they've got a stake in the game, so to speak, then they will participate and contribute to the community and actually help everybody else deliver these things that we think are most important, or that we want or need. And that's where we actually need to broaden that idea of what we have available to us. It's not just the things that we can put dollar figures on. It's these things that are somewhat intangible, like the rules of the game, the structures we have, and that sense of community. And I think that's the critical element that I think we're suddenly realising is actually one of the biggest assets that we've got as a nation in our economy, if you like, is the current sense of community. That's why we've managed, most people, I know there's been some exclusions, but most people have actually abided by the rules of the game in terms of the lockdown rules and level 4, despite all the harshness it's done to many of our lives. And we're realising we actually need to, that's a very valuable resource. And if we can keep hold of that and realise that, it will make our ability to deliver things better, a lot easier in the future.
Cool, thank you. Pam, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, that was really, really interesting. Thanks, Ganesh. So there's economics and economic development, slightly different things. And my job's all about economic development. So when I came into the role and needed to explain it to my brother, who knows nothing about economics, he's a nurse in the Hawke's Bay, it's about making the lives of people better the community or the city or the region in which you live, right? So that goes to a bit about what Ganesh is saying. So how do people have more affordable homes? How do they have transport to get to jobs? How do they actually get quality jobs? And I think the whole idea of ensuring that people can create a livelihood out of whatever job, whether it's in the gig economy like you, Cissy, or for other people that may be salary earners or business owners or the like, how do you use the resources around you to have a better life? And then what are the systems and structures around that that enable that to happen? And in terms of the whole not money and cents thing, when I went back to learn economics, I see someone talked about 101 economics, and I remember doing that too, and didn't make a lot of sense. When I went back and did some study, there was an economist that really spoke to me, and that's someone who Ganesh will be very aware of, Amartya Sen, who was an Indian economist, and he wrote a book called Development is Freedom. So he talks about the economy as a series of freedoms. So a well-functioning economy doesn't need to be rich, but it enables people to have freedom to have political voice, to live in a home. So he bases it around 5 different freedoms. But you know, that whole idea that the economy is much broader than just what we read about in the paper and hear about dollars and cents is a really good way to position it for tonight.
It doesn't really feel like that at the moment when people talk about the economy. Like when I hear you talking about that, and I can imagine a system where we all feel like we can contribute, and there's resources, and but at the moment it feels like there's a lot of people who are who are on benefits and on low wages, who don't have enough and don't have any freedom, and yet people say that that's because of the economy, it has to be like that.
And that's that's that narrow view of the economy, which is very much around, say, for example, the government's account. So it's the government's dollars and cents, and you do that narrow view of an economy, it's relatively easy to think up of reasons why we can't do things, or think of reasons why we should do this and not that. It is very much that dollars and cents perspective of an economy, and I think you've actually got to think about who's driving that sort of discussion, and where is the opportunity for others to actually come to the table and start driving a different discussion about the economy, one which is around freedoms, the freedom and the opportunity to engage and participate. And that's still economics, but it's a different perspective on economics. So, it may be complicating it too much, but I do know why many people turn off economics is because it has been very successfully hijacked by people who only have a very interest in the narrow dollars and cents.
Yeah. And traditional economics has been based on that idea. And you know, what you're seeing now is some new ways of thinking. Someone's mentioned about growth. So what we read about in the newspaper, we hear about, it's all about growth. The economy's grown. GDP has been the measure traditionally of what we're doing. And there's this new desire by many people to think about more about being able to thrive in the economy rather than having to grow the economy, which in its nature excludes certain people because people have different advantages that they can use and levers to get ahead and maybe leave others behind.
Yes, and I think that, sorry, Cissy, if I can come in.
Yeah.
I think that point about growth is well made, because that, again, reinforces a very narrow perspective on the economy. The objective is to grow. The assumption, and yes, it is an assumption, is that more is better. So we assume that as long as we can get hold of more resources and so deliver more stuff, produce more stuff, doesn't matter what it is, as long as we deliver more, the assumption is that that's better, and that's going to lead to better living standards and better prosperity for all. I would actually, and one of the discussions that is happening now is actually for quite a long time, but it's becoming quite upfront now, is to actually challenge that argument about more is better. And in particular, when we're talking about resources, rather than always focusing on using the resources to extract more stuff out of them, how can we actually start, or wouldn't it be about time to start thinking about how we maintain and protect those resources to make sure that they are available for the next generation? Now, that's a different economic model, it's a different business model, because there's a different objective. The objective is not just more, the objective is actually conserving and protecting the resources that we have available to us. And that's a challenging mindset to actually change. But once we start getting different people at the different table with a, dare I say, a different set of values coming to that discussion table, we might start opening up that discussion about a different economic and business model.
So shortly we're going to start thinking about some of the other alternative models or the tactics or interventions that might be to bring about this economy that we want, that has more caring in it. But I just want to so you're saying maybe a small group of people have kind of hijacked this idea of economy and or economics. So when people are saying things like scarcity and free market principles and the gross domestic product and CPI, and you go, oh, above my head, this is because they're just honed in on one aspect of what an economy is. Or
it's effectively, it is the conventional traditional definition of perspective on economics, which is to say is more is better. So the bigger the economy, the better. The more it's producing, the better. The more it's consuming and the more we're spending, the better. And that's what's driving those metrics, whether it's be GDP or whether it's CPI or whatever else it might be. And I think it's we have to actually start challenging that and actually say, well, actually we've had more is better for the last 40 years. We've had the free market principles for the last 40 years, and bluntly, the free market principles is government get out of the way and let us all do what we can, what we want to do. That hasn't delivered the outcomes. It actually hasn't delivered better for many of us. It's delivered better for some of us. I'm quite well off out of it, and thank you very much, but I am aware of it for a large group in the population. It hasn't delivered them anything better at all. So we actually got to think about, well, actually that model that we've been following for the last 40 odd years is something seriously wrong with it.
Can I just add, Cissy, when we talk about economy, there's lots of different economies. So Ganesh talked about the free market economy just before, and that's around goods and services produced and exchanged, through a unit of currency, usually money. But, you hear other things talked about now that people will have heard. So we talk about the green economy. And so that's about a low carbon, biodiverse, good use of natural resources. You mentioned the gig economy, so that's around people working short-term jobs. A lot of creative people work in the gig economy. And then there's also talk now, you may have seen, around the new economy, and that's resulting from technology and innovation from technology. And again, on the creative side, because I see someone's mentioned that, you think about creative technology such as gaming, esports, doing business online, it's all referred to as sort of the new economy. So not wanting to confuse people, maybe, there are different ways of thinking about economy, different flavours, I guess, in the ice cream parlour.
Which is good to know.
And I think the one thing you must add into that is the voluntary and the non-paid, non-market, non-paid, unpaid efforts that we all do in daily life that are part of that economic system of delivering, if you like, well-being, or trying to deliver well-being. It's probably the biggest part of our lives, but it's not measured and doesn't fit into our nice narrow box.
So we've expanded what economy means already. I'm looking at the chat as well and noticing, I used CPI. I actually don't know what it means, but someone's saying, what does it mean? But in a way, we don't need to know what
Right.
it means because they're measurements. Yeah, is that what you're saying, Ganesh? Yeah, and that we actually can look at the economy in lots of different ways. So even we talk about capitalism, but if we were talking about socialism or communism, there'd still have to be some sort of trading of resources. There'd still be some economy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much so. It's just the structures and the rules of the game are different in those other systems. And I think there's that, and the other thing we've got to acknowledge is the objectives may be different.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we've got to talk about. What do we actually want? What's the objective of our economic system? As I say, we just assume that more is better is the objective. Now we're beginning to think, well, maybe not, and GDP is not a great measure. So what is it? Is it well-being? Is it something different?
Yeah. So
So
how come when the WEAG report, the Welfare Expert Advisory Group's report came out, the government couldn't find any more money to pay people who obviously didn't have enough money to live off, being on the benefits, but now during COVID there is money to pay people? How does that work in an economy?
Well, again, we're confusing the money thing with the economy thing. The money is, without getting too technical, is artificial, for want of a better word. It's just a vehicle that we use to enable us to use up resources or find these resources and turn them into something that we can deliver, whether it's producing stuff or delivering services. The money is, bluntly, it is created by government, and the government can create as much money as it likes. There are consequences, there are impacts, and there are effects depending upon how much it creates and how little it creates. But effectively, whenever you hear the phrase about lack of money or we can't afford it, always think about who's saying that, because that person or that organisation will be coming from a set of values or a set of perspectives, or probably a position of power that wants to retain some form of the status quo. So just question, are they really honestly believing that the government literally cannot print money, or are they worried about the impacts of the government doing this and how that might impact on their lifestyle? And so the discussion with the WEAG, or the discussion with the low level of benefits that we have in this country now, is purely, in my opinion, a reflection of our set of values. As a nation, we are, I won't say comfortable, but we are prepared to live with. In the past, we've been prepared to live with this group of the population, as long as they weren't too big, the group, living in quite desperate situations, as long as it didn't impact on the status quo, and as long as the rest of us could go about our daily lives and the system wouldn't fall apart. Now we're realising, come 6 weeks, we realise, well, actually there's quite a large group in the population that are going to be hurt by this challenge, by this pandemic. We've got to make sure we look after them. And so suddenly we managed to find the cash for that. Because it's a much bigger group in the population, and it does threaten the status quo.
It's important to also realise that finding that cash doesn't come free. So the government has to borrow that money to then, has suddenly decided, as it should, that we are in a crisis and we need to go to some measures that they would not choose to otherwise. But that's about borrowing more money, which will have to be paid back over time. So what's happening now is going to have an impact for a long time on our children and so forth. So, yeah.
Yeah. And
it all comes down to choice.
No, it does. And I think that's the challenge for New Zealand at the moment, is whatever we do is going to impact on our future children, on our mokopuna and beyond, because whatever choices we make, whether we go down the austerity route or whether we go down the borrowing route, none of those options are actually very nice. There is no good option. There's just a series of rather bad ones, and we've got to choose the best one. And I think that's what we've got to realise or encourage an open debate about what are we prepared to leave, knowing full well we're going to have to borrow from future generations, whether that's in terms of real stuff or whether it's that paper money, it's irrelevant. What do we want to leave that that future generation? And that's where I say, well, we want to leave them as much of the current resources that we have. We've still got the buildings, we've still got the people, we've still got our community infrastructure and all of those sorts. We want to leave those as much as we can intact for the future, rather than losing all of that and maintaining a pristine financial balance sheet.
Robert makes a very good point, which I might confuse people. So the government doesn't have to borrow money. It is taking money to try and create new jobs, create productive environments. So it's getting a bit complex, but you kind of get the idea.
Well, I mean, there is an argument about whether the government has to borrow money or it could literally print money itself, which it doesn't, depending on the technicalities. It doesn't necessarily have to pay it back in the future, but there will be other consequences. But again, the cutting away those details, the challenge from an economist perspective, the options are quite stark. Whichever option we choose, we're going to leave something it's going to have an impact on our future generation. We've got to choose whether we, in my mind, we've got to choose, do we make a total mess now in terms of all of our resources, but leave them with a nice financial balance sheet? Or do we make a bit of a mess of the financial balance sheet, but leave them as much of those real resources, those real things that we can actually use, leave them in as good a state as possible into the future? And so those are the sorts of the two stark choices I would think that we have in front of us. And in my mind, the people who have chosen to go down that austerity route, they just close everything down now and don't pay out benefits, don't pay out all these safety nets, don't forget about the wage subsidy because we can't afford it and all of those sorts of things. That route has never actually ever succeeded out of any crisis, whether you go back to the Great Depression or any of the wars. The nations that succeed in terms of coming out of a crisis are the ones that do somehow maintain as much of that structure within their system, whether it's the sense of community or whether it's the land and the buildings or whether it's the people, and the people and their skills and their technology and their creativity, their sense of enterprise, those sorts of things that you want to keep as much of. The money we can fiddle around with accountants' books, even the buildings we can rebuild, but those other those difficult things like the sense of community, that sense of inclusion, those are the ones that take generations to rebuild if we lose them.
So I get that money in a way is the last thing that we should be talking about. Like people like me, I hear economics and the economy and I think money, but now I can come back and say, well, I'm thinking about a different approach. And I think what we've heard, people, my idea of the economy doesn't mean that we have to make lots of money. It means that we're sharing our resources in a way that we can all thrive. And when you were talking, I was thinking about when I was at Play Centre, I had 3 kids. I was by myself. I was a single mother. There was about 5 of us. We had no money. But, we pulled all our resources together. We had a really good time. We could make things happen. We put on great parties. And that feeling of being connected and, being in relationship with other people was kind of priceless. And I wonder whether that's one of the things I noticed when my gigs, so my contracts were cancelled, is that suddenly I'm at home and I have so much more time to talk and connect with people, and I feel richer and freer in myself. And I think lots of the people here on the chat are saying, yeah, that's what we want. So is that what, when we hear about things like the Green New Deal, circular economy, donut economics, participatory economics, localism, are these all ways of trying to shift the focus away from needing more money into other values-based systems? Pam, you go first.
There's a lot there. Well, absolutely. I mean, you talked about some new models like Donuts talked about a lot, Kate Rayworth, around understanding the relationship between human needs and well-being and having a social kind of well-being platform that you don't go beyond and you choose as a society what that level is, and then around that working within the resources of the planet, and the whole economy, if you like, works in the middle there. And then I've just lost my train of thought. Localism. So one of the themes that's coming through strongly through this COVID time is the importance of localism. So you can see it even, lockdown, we were confined to our own house, to our own street, to our own neighbourhood. And as we progress through the next while of this world in which we're going to live, the importance of local will be significant. And that's not just in how we, it's about balancing the health implications of what we're facing. We would still have, could have outbreaks coming up, but how do we enable our communities and our town centres, our schools and the people that live there thrive through this time? Yeah, so you're going to have some really interesting dynamics at a very local level that we haven't seen for probably some time, and that's quite an exciting prospect. You'll see more people working from home. You'll see different patterns of transport. You'll see different ways in how possibly people consume goods and services. So how do we enable that and enhance the local side, part of the economy?
Sure.
Ganesh, do you want to?
I think the critical thing that, well, not critical thing. One of the things that is brought up is I suppose what are the things that we actually value, and it's what's sitting in the background, that word value and values. And whenever it comes in an economic discussion, when we talk about value, we almost always default to dollars and cents and how we measure. But I actually think we need to start thinking, go back to what we actually mean by value. What do we value? What are the things we want out of an economy that we want to value out of our economic system, out of our economic mechanism? And those values, those many of those intangible things, those sense of community, that sense of sharing, that ability to participate, and that sort of goes to then defining our objective. What is our kaupapa, whether we're at a business or a whānau or an iwi or a local council? What is our kaupapa? Why are we here, and what are we trying to achieve? And once, it may sound academic, it may sound philosophical, but if we can nail those sorts of discussions, then we can actually start driving the decisions towards those discussions, rather than the default, which is very much drives the decision making now. The default is our value is whatever the market tells it is in terms of dollars and cents, and our objective is more is better. And so that's what has driven our decision making for such a long time. Now, and that's where I do a lot of work with many Māori organisations in terms of our own commercial work. But that's what I always find way more interesting than some of the mainstream work that I do, for want of a better word, is because it's a different mindset when you're talking about a kaupapa. Yeah, it is not the maximising the shareholder return to the shareholders. The kaupapa is a, whatever it is, 3 generation, 5 generation, 500-year long-term strategic plan, which just is a totally different mindset, totally different objective. And then you start doing decision making to reach those objectives, just reinforces to me that actually there was an economy here long before Jimmy Cook arrived. There was, and there are alternative other economic systems that have functioned and delivered the objective, whether that's well-being or prosperity for future, whatever it might be, but just to recognise that the market mechanism that we've had in the textbooks for the last, I don't know, let's say the last 100 years, hasn't actually driven the world for a long time. If you're talking about in the total length of history, so go back to ask yourself, what is the objective of our economic system, of our community system? What's the objective? Why are we here? And then we can start driving decisions to head towards that. Otherwise, we're just all accepting that default objective, more is better.
So, I mean, someone did make the comment in the chat that, you know, if you don't have any money, you it is something that you're thinking about. Yeah. And it does remind me of my times of going around the supermarket with a calculator, and I don't enjoy that, and I don't want that for anyone. You know, I'd like us all to be able to shop. But you're saying, you know, okay, I think everyone here is onto it. I mean, some people here are even in the chat are saying, let's not even have any money. Let's go without money into, you know, have a system that has no money. So we're up for it. Our values are that we do want to be living, our objective is for people to be living with dignity and to have enough resources. How do we do that? Do we have to vote in a new government?
Well, for me, it's again that, to me, I would say it's not the more is better. We use our resources as much as we can, but it's the distribution of those resources that's just as important. So we intervene in the market. We let the market do what it does sometimes reasonably well, which is deliver good products. But then we actually unapologetically intervene and say, that market outcome is not what we're after. We're going to change it, and we're going to make sure that it's distributed, the prosperity, the benefits are distributed way more evenly, because we actually do value people who stay at home to look after their grandparents. We actually do value people who stay at home to volunteer to clean up the waterways. And so that, and the market's never going to value that. So we need to intervene to redistribute, to make sure that we all have the opportunity to access resources, put food on the table, and contribute.
And I like it when you say that, and I guess that the basic income is a mechanism for doing that redistribution. But who is the we when we say we have to?
We, full stop, all of us.
Yep.
We have to start engaging in, and call me naive, but I've still got a little bit of faith in the democratic system. We do have to engage in korero around all of those organisations, because let's face it, for too long, the power of the status quo has driven those decision makers. And if we exclude ourselves or are unable to include ourselves in those decision makers, then the status quo will continue. So either we have to bash down the door and get to that table, that decision-making table, or we replace it.
Pam, do you want to add to that?
Well, that's what you're saying at this time, a lot more ground-up discussion around alternative ways of working through this time, and maybe not quite bashing down the doors yet, but there's an opening for some of these ideas. And I was looking back, history is a great teacher, and this is recent history, but after the global financial crisis, and the World Bank said, right, we're going to have inclusive green growth, and that's going to, we're going to achieve that out of this crisis. And I think Angela Merkel said, I want sustained growth for all of our people. So, and all of those people said these things. So it's all very well for leaders to say these things. I guess they need, it needs a lot of ground up influence, holding to account. And then all of us in some way are influencers or leaders trying to do our bit. And, there's this thinking that the time of lockdown was a time to reflect and stop and breathe, let the earth breathe, let ourselves have a bit of time to have that kōrero, and maybe give us a bit more strength to be able to go in and feel more confident about who we are as people, what are our values, what do we want for our neighbourhood, for our community, for our town, for our city, for our country. Which again, to hark what Ganesh says, sounding a bit philosophical and all the rest of it, but as a society, I think we've all valued this time to really think hard about what is most important to us, and stop for a moment. How things happen over the next few weeks and months to go into the next phase is a whole different ball game, and that's going to require a lot of resolve and strength of action from people that really care, and a lot of the people on this call today.
I think the one thing that I would add in terms of a very immediate thing is local government, and okay, not many of us has contacts direct to Wellington or the Beehive, but the pressures on local councils at the moment are quite stark and strong, very much from the status quo, which is being to narrow local government and literally encourage them to go down the austerity route. And that is a battle that is happening here and now in the town halls in the cities, in the Zoom meetings that we have. And that's where I think for those who can, to be engaged in those debates and that discussion as much as you can, because believe you me, the status quo are operating very fast in that area at the moment in terms of tying the hands of councils, tying down their hands and telling them to stop spending and sack some staff and reduce their cost overheads for local businesses. And again, it is very much a knee-jerk response that I don't think we'd want to go down.
It's very real. Where I live, our council has got a dramatic decrease in revenue, which has got a huge impact. So really quite frightening. So that's where central government's so important, because that's where 93% of taxes come from. And yeah, that's a whole nother, there's quite a few council employees, I think, on this call, so I won't say too much.
Hey, if we're talking about interventions, then are and I have mentioned the circular economy and donut economics, which I think are more maybe in the models of how we can do things. But what about and then there's basic income, because I have to bang on about that because I'm behind that. What sort of thing? What would you like to talk about? We've got 10 minutes left. What from these interventions? What do you want to draw our attention to?
To me, I think one of the biggest and simplest and fastest interventions would be around housing. Let's go out and have a sizable, big house building program across New Zealand. It will employ a lot of people because it'll be local, because all the local builders and electricians and plumbers and everybody else will be in on it. And even if it's not building new houses, let's just fix the houses we've got, because our housing, the conditions of the houses, and some of you may well know, is absolutely shocking that we expect some people to actually live in these houses. They are damp, they are effectively uninhabitable. Let's start at one end of the country, or let's start at all ends of the country and meet at the middle and go house by house and just fix all those houses. That would make such a huge change to many people's well-being and their ability to then actually participate and contribute. That to me would be a huge intervention, but you could actually literally see the place change overnight.
Great, thank you. Pam.
Well, as silver bullets go, that's a pretty good one. Be hard to beat that. I just, all of us, many of us have lived overseas and in cold countries, and then you come back here and live in our cold houses.
On at the moment.
I mean, we've got warm houses, but I mean, yeah, that's a very good one. Look, I just think getting people into to jobs where they can earn a living wage or beyond and stepped up. That's something that occupies my mind. Don't have as much influence over it as I'd like, but you know, people need to have jobs. We're going into a period of thousands of people will be made unemployed, which has huge impacts on mental health, health in general. Where are the areas where we can provide jobs for people, create jobs for people? And a big part of that is upskilling and retraining people. So, you know, the inverse, while a lot of industries or businesses will be struggling right now, the inverse will be for the education sector. So how do we enable the education sector to help people? How do we address issues like the digital divide? So people who don't have access to technology devices or internet, given that we're in a new economy these days, which really relies on digital. So all those sorts of equity type things are something I think would be a good start.
I see people in the chat are talking about things like social procurement, housing, some people talking about you know, getting local boards to change their grant criteria. There's lots of ideas out there about how we can do this.
Yeah.
But neither one of you have mentioned the basic income, like this idea of there being a baseline income for all New Zealanders.
Sure. I just I what's the word? I'm comfortable with the concept of a basic income. I think the difficulty and the challenge we've got in front of us is actually to have the discussion so it's acceptable to others, acceptable to the broader population. And that's that discussion about values that I was talking about before. Yeah. We've actually got to have a discussion out there that says, look, we value everybody's contribution. People are staying at home looking after their parents or their grandchildren or their grandparents. We actually value that contribution and they should not be excluded from the economy. And similarly, those who volunteer for the city mission or volunteer at the marae, or those who volunteer at the local school or in the environment club, those are the things that if we honestly and seriously value those things, then if we can get to a position where we do value those things as a community, then we've won the argument about a universal income. Because then we get past the argument about, oh, I don't want to pay people for sitting on their butts doing nothing. And you say, well, they're not sitting on their butts. They are doing something that's just not in your market economy, but they are contributing. And that's what we've got to get past.
That's what I'm going to say. That's going to be my quote. It's just not your market, not in your market economy. It's exactly. A good one. Exactly. Pam, what did you want to say anything about?
Well, it's a tricky one because it becomes so politicised, and you know, there's fors and against on the whole idea. I'm not going to land on one point of view, but I think the idea of going back to values-based, what do we value most, and if it's valuing everybody's contribution, then you would have a really strong argument for a universal base income. I believe it worked in Iran, of all places, and I think there was some trials in Canada as well, so and many other places. But those are the debates that we should be having right now, you know, when we are semi-united.
Yeah, I was thinking about the hunger we have to take action, but in a way, just participating in a webinar like this, listening in on a webinar, having conversations with our friends, having these discussions is taking action. We're in, you know, it's the first step to really mobilising and organising ourselves and getting our ideas together.
We've done a lot of work with creative industries over the last year or so, and that's the whole idea of a UBI type of scheme for creatives has been talked a lot about by the government. There's been talk again about the PEP schemes that we had back in, what was it, the 80s, Ganesh, or 90s?
70s.
70s? Oh my God.
70s, yeah.
What's a PEP scheme, just for everyone at home?
Oh, young ones.
Employment program or something like that?
Yeah, so people went and did work. It could be voluntary work, could be working on the marae, or weaving panels or whatever. And people got paid. They wouldn't have possibly otherwise.
Yep, project employment program. Thanks, Tanya.
Oh, thanks, Tanya.
I've got one last question. With COVID-19, we had 8 important interrelated measures to gauge both progress and success. So what are the important and relevant metrics needed to reassure New Zealanders and give them confidence that that the recovery program is working? I think Diana's out there. She can put more into the message box. But is that saying that
you, Ganesh?
To me, it's around that safety net that we're trying to put around people, which has to be as broad as possible to capture as many in our community, and I'm including businesses as well as individuals and households within that safety net, so that they don't become disconnected and don't become excluded from our community, from our networks, from our economy, and hopefully that safety net will be as broad and as strong as possible, so that when the recovery does happen, there are enough people there to pick it up and will be as inclusive as possible. In terms of when will we know, I don't think we'll be in any position to know until the rest of the world has sorted its mess out. So we can do a little bit of, I won't say tinkering, but we can do a little bit of recovery, assuming the Australians can sort themselves out as well, maybe with the help of the Australians in terms of our own bubble. But it's until the rest of the world, and that rest of the world, as you well know, is a bit of a mess out there, and for lots of reasons. It was a bit of a mess well before COVID, and this has just made it even worse. So if you're looking for one number, it's got to be the unemployment number, whether that be the unemployment number in terms of the official number, or whether it's the number on that the job seeker benefit, or basically caught up in that wage subsidy net. Hopefully that is going to get large. We have to understand that, but hopefully that wage subsidy is extended in next week's budget. It's got to be, so that, as I say, that safety net is as broad and strong as possible.
Thank you. Pam?
Yeah, it comes down to people in jobs and having money. And there's a shout out too to people running businesses at the moment, hanging on by a thread and doing their darndest to keep their employees safe and in jobs so that they can provide for families. And I'm coming across that day in, day out. We're taking calls every day from people, that business owners really working hard to keep their people employed, as are all sorts of organisations, really feeling for the non-profit organisations doing it tough. It's going to be a hard few months and years, which is why the social fabric of the society has to be so strong and stick together.
Well, we're running out of time. I didn't realise there was so much to talk about. I reckon we could go for a whole day together, but we're going to pause here. I think perhaps the next webinar should be about tactics, so on the grassroots, what can we do? What are some ideas for actually getting going with the intervention? So if you have any great ideas for people to be on the panel, drop me an email. But I'm going to thank you all at home for being part of this and being part of the chat. It's been great. I know we didn't answer questions specifically, but I think we tried to cover that ground. I think we could do a whole webinar on a world without money. We might just do that for fun. But I'm going to leave the last word. So I'm going to thank you all and leave Ganesh and Pam to say just one reflection each as we leave tonight. So Pam, you first.
I'm just looking at all these comments, quite a range. Tanya Porphyry's talked about a Keynesian approach. So that's around creating some big projects, which was what happened after the Great Depression. My final take is, in the notes, Richard said no to jobs, but if we can help people have meaningful lives, whether it's working in a day job, working in the community, working at home, and contributing in a meaningful way, that's the most important thing that we can do right now.
Right, thank you. And Ganesh?
To me, I just, I suppose, reinforce my concern for those that you don't hear from, the ones who are not shouting the loudest or who are not at the front of the queue, because those are the people in our community that will be hurting the most. And I think those are the people that we need to make sure are at that decision-making table, or at least are represented at that decision-making table. And yeah, and for too long the decisions have been made ignoring the excluded in our community, and underpinning all of that, I think we've got to make sure that Māori are at that decision-making table, full stop.
Yeah, totally agree.
It's a great place to finish. Thank you all. Thank you everyone at home. Go well, everyone, and I'll catch you next time for the next webinar. And until then, don't forget, it's us who has to go banging on the door to get the change that we need, because we're all in this together. Okay. Ka kite.
Ka kite.
Thank you. Very good.
Thank you.